The words hit like a hammer to the chest. "You're not welcome here anymore." My own son said it without blinking, his voice colder than the winter wind outside. I stood frozen in the doorway of what had been my home, watching the man I had raised become a stranger before my eyes. As I packed my bags with shaking hands, one terrible thought consumed me. How does a father survive being erased from his child's life? This is a story of how I found my way back from that moment, and the shocking truth that saved our relationship. From which country are you enjoying the story? Please make sure to tell us in the comments. Subscribe to follow this emotional journey of broken bonds and unexpected redemption. The glass in my hand felt heavier than it should have, not because of the champagne, but because of the weight of the moment. The room was filled with laughter, the kind that lingers just a little too long, the kind that carries a sharp edge beneath its polished surface. I stood there, holding a silver tray, my fingers gripping it just a little tighter than necessary. The fabric of my rented tuxedo itched at my neck, but I didn't adjust it. I didn't move at all. Across the room, my son-in-law, Daniel, raised his glass, his smile easy and practiced. He had the kind of confidence that came from never having to doubt his place in the world. The guests around him, men in tailored suits, women in dresses that cost more than my car, leaned in, already anticipating whatever charming thing he was about to say. Then he said it. "Come on, everyone, let's be real. He's just a waiter." A pause, just long enough to let the words sink in. "No offense, but did you really think he belonged here?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. Not exactly. It was the kind of laughter that happens when people don't know what else to do, when they're too polite to call out something ugly, but too weak to stay silent. A few of them glanced at me, their expressions caught between pity and discomfort. My daughter, Emily, stood beside Daniel, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She didn't laugh, but she didn't say anything either. I had known this moment was coming. Not this exact moment, perhaps, but something like it. From the first time I met Daniel, I had seen the way his eyes flickered over me, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes when he shook my hand. He was polite, always polite, but in the way people are when they're tolerating something beneath them. Emily had met him in law school. She'd been so excited when she told me about him, her voice bright with the kind of hope I hadn't heard in years. "Dad, you'll love him," she had said. "He's smart, he's kind, his family is amazing." I had wanted to believe her, but the first time I visited their apartment, a sleek, modern thing in a building with a doorman, I saw the way Daniel's gaze lingered on my shoes, the way his mother's lips pursed when I mentioned where I worked. The Grand Oak Hotel had been my job for 12 years. I wasn't ashamed of it. I had worked harder than most of the people in this room ever had, carrying trays until my feet ached, remembering names and orders because it mattered to me to do it right. But to them, it was just a punchline. The rehearsal dinner had been worse. I had arrived in my best suit, the one I only wore for funerals and weddings. Daniel's father, Richard, had greeted me with a clap on the back that felt more like a dismissal. "Marcus, good to see you. Listen, we're short-staffed. One of the servers called in sick. You don't mind helping out, do you?" I had looked at Emily. She had bitten her lip, her eyes pleading, so I had taken the uniform. And now, here I was, at my own daughter's wedding, serving champagne to people who didn't even see me. The worst part wasn't Daniel's words. It wasn't even the laughter. It was the way Emily didn't react. The way she just stood there, her face carefully blank, like she was afraid to ruin the moment. That was when I realized something. They had no idea who I was. Not really, because tomorrow they would all see me on TV. And by then it would be too late for apologies. The reception was still in full swing when I slipped out. The night air was cool against my skin, a relief after the stifling heat of the ballroom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look at it to know who was calling. I answered. "Marcus." The voice on the other end said, "It's time." I took a deep breath. Tell them I'm ready. And then I walked away from the wedding, toward the car waiting at the end of the driveway. Inside, a man in a dark suit handed me a folder. I opened it, skimming the contents, a contract, a press release, a schedule. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I had one last stop to make. I gave the driver an address. And as the car pulled away, I didn't look back. The car moved silently through the city, the hum of the engine barely audible over the sound of my own thoughts. The folder sat heavy in my lap, its contents a stark reminder of the life I had walked away from years ago, the life none of them knew about. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You sure about this, sir?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched the city lights blur past the window, each one a fleeting spark in the darkness. I thought about Emily's face at the wedding, the way she had looked at me, or rather, the way she hadn't, like I was part of the scenery. "Yeah," I finally said, "I'm sure." The car turned onto a quiet street, the kind lined with old trees and houses that had seen generations come and go. It stopped in front of a small, unassuming building. A place that didn't look like much on the outside, but inside held the key to everything that was about to happen. I stepped out, the folder tucked under my arm, and walked up the steps. The door opened before I could knock. Marcus. A woman stood there, her sharp eyes scanning me like she was assessing damage. "Took you long enough." "Nice to see you too, Clara," I said dryly. She stepped aside to let me in, closing the door behind us with a quiet click. The interior was all warm wood and soft lighting, a stark contrast to the cold opulence of the wedding venue. This was a place meant for work, for focus. Clara crossed her arms. "You look like hell." "I feel like hell," I admitted, sinking into a chair. She didn't offer sympathy. Clara wasn't the type. Instead, she poured 2 glasses of whiskey and pushed one toward me. "So, they finally pushed you too far." I took the glass, the amber liquid catching the light. "Something like that." She sat across from me, her expression unreadable. "You know what this means, right? Once we do this, there's no going back." I swallowed the whiskey, letting it burn its way down my throat. "There hasn't been a way back for a long time, Clara." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, let's get to work." We spent the next few hours going over the details, the contracts, the press releases, the carefully crafted statements. Every word mattered. Every detail had to be perfect, because tomorrow the world would find out the truth. And Daniel Harrington? He was going to regret ever calling me just a waiter. The studio lights were blinding. I sat in the green room, my knee bouncing restlessly as I waited for the producer to call me on set. The TV mounted on the wall played the morning news. The sound turned low. A headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Mystery CEO emerges after decade of silence." Clara handed me a coffee. Nervous? I took the cup, the heat seeping into my fingers. "No." She raised an eyebrow. "Okay, maybe a little," I admitted. She smirked. "Good. Means you're not an idiot." The door opened, and a young assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Carter, we're ready for you." I stood, straightening my tie. This was it. The walk to the set felt longer than it should have. The studio was a flurry of activity. Cameras being adjusted, microphones tested, last-minute notes exchanged. The host, a well-known journalist with a reputation for hard-hitting interviews, smiled as I approached. "Mr. Carter," she said, extending her hand. "It's an honor." I shook it. "Let's just get this over with." She laughed like I'd made a joke. Then the countdown began. 5, 4, 3. The red light on the camera blinked on. 2, 1. And then we were live. "Good morning, America," the host said, her voice smooth and practiced. "Today, we have a very special guest. A man who disappeared from the public eye 10 years ago, only to resurface in the most unexpected way. Marcus Carter, former CEO of Carter Innovations. Welcome." I nodded. "Thank you for having me." She leaned forward slightly. "Now, our viewers may not recognize your name, but they certainly know your work. Carter Innovations revolutionized the tech industry before your sudden retirement. And yet, until recently, you've been working under the radar, quite literally, as a waiter at the Grand Oak Hotel. Can you tell us why?" I took a breath, and then I told him everything. The interview lasted an hour. By the end of it, the host's carefully composed expression had slipped into something like awe. The crew, usually too focused on their jobs to react, had gone still. When the cameras finally cut, the room erupted into chatter. Clara appeared at my side, her phone buzzing incessantly. "Well," she said, "you've done it now." I rubbed my temples. "How bad is it?" She showed me her screen. Social media was already exploding. Hashtag Marcus Carter was trending. News outlets were scrambling to put together segments. And, most damning of all, someone had already dug up footage from the wedding. A clip of Daniel's words, asterisk, he's just a waiter, asterisk, played on loop, juxtaposed with my interview. Clara smirked. I'd say it's about to get very interesting. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily, asterisk, Dad. "We need to talk, asterisk." I stared at the screen, my chest tight. Clara nudged me. "You gonna answer that?" I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Not yet, because this wasn't over. Not even close. The silence in the car was suffocating. Clara sat beside me, her fingers flying across her tablet as she monitored the media storm unfolding in real time. Every few seconds, another notification popped up, another news outlet picking up the story, another tweet dissecting Daniel's words, another think piece about the billionaire who vanished. I stared out the window, watching the city blur past. My phone had been vibrating nonstop for the last 20 minutes. Emily, Daniel, even Richard Harrington had called twice. I hadn't answered. Clara finally broke the silence. "Well, you wanted a reaction. You got one." She turned the tablet toward me. The screen showed a live news feed, the cheering screaming. Billionaire waiter exposes son-in-law's humiliation. I closed my eyes. This isn't about revenge. "Could have fooled me," Clara muttered. I didn't bother arguing. She knew why I'd done this. It wasn't just about Daniel's smug face or the way Emily had let it happen. It was about the years I'd spent quietly watching, waiting, wondering if they'd ever really see me. The car pulled up to my apartment, a modest place I'd kept even after stepping away from Carter Innovations. The press was already there, a swarm of cameras and microphones crowding the sidewalk. Clara sighed, back in trance. I shook my head. "No, let's get this over with." The second I stepped out, the shouting began. Asterisk, "Mr. Carter, why did you hide your identity?" Asterisk, asterisk, "What do you say to the Harringtons now?" Asterisk, asterisk, "Is it true you're reclaiming your company?" Asterisk. I ignored them all, pushing through the crowd until I reached the door. Inside, the chaos faded to a dull roar. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Neat, sparse, the only personal touch a framed photo of Emily on the mantel. She was 8 in the picture, grinning with a missing tooth, her arms wrapped around my neck. Clara whistled low. "Cozy." I shot her a look. "You're hilarious." She flopped onto the couch, pulling out her laptop. "All right, let's talk damage control. The press is eating this up, but we need to steer the narrative before." A knock at the door cut her off. We both froze. Clara raised an eyebrow. Expecting someone? I didn't answer. The knock came again, harder this time. I walked to the door and pulled it open. Emily stood there, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands shaking. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Dad." And just like that, the dam broke. Part 6, The Reckoning. Emily collapsed into my arms, sobbing so hard her entire body trembled. I held her tightly, my throat too tight to speak. Over her shoulder, I saw Clara discreetly slip into the bedroom, giving us privacy. I led Emily to the couch, her grip on my sleeve desperate, like she was afraid I'd vanish again. When she finally pulled back, her face was streaked with mascara. "I didn't know," she choked out. "I swear I didn't know." I handed her a tissue. "About Carter Innovations?" "About any of it." She wiped her eyes, her breath hitching. "You never told me that you had... I wanted you to love me for me," I said quietly. "Not for my money, not for my name." She flinched like I'd struck her. "And you thought I wouldn't?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The truth was, I'd spent years wondering if Emily would have looked at me differently if she'd known. if she'd have been prouder, if Daniel would have treated me with respect. Now I had my answer. Emily swallowed hard. Daniel's freaking out. His family's lawyers are already calling. They think you're going to sue. I almost laughed. I don't want their money. Then what do you want? I studied her face, the daughter I'd raised, the woman I barely recognized. I want to know why you didn't stop him. Her tears started fresh. I was scared. Of what? Of losing everything. She buried her face in her hands. Their family, the connections of life, I thought I needed it, and I didn't want to ruin it. The admission hung between us, ugly and raw. Clara chose that moment to reappear, clearing her throat. Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. She turned her laptop toward us. On screen was a live press conference. Richard Harrington standing at a podium, his face grim. Deeply regret the misunderstanding. He was saying, asterisk, we've always respected Marcus Carter, and we look forward to reconciling as a family. Asterisk. Emily made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. They're lying. I shut the laptop. I know. Clara crossed her arms. So, what's the play? I looked at Emily. Really looked at her. Then I made my decision. Pack your bags, I told her. We're going to the office. The elevator door slid open with a quiet chime, revealing the lobby of Carter Innovations for the first time in nearly a decade. The space had changed, new furniture, brighter lighting, a massive digital display scrolling through company milestones, but the bones of it remained the same. The air still carried that faint hum of electricity and ambition, the scent of expensive coffee and fresh circuitry. I stepped forward, Emily hovering uncertainly at my side. Clara had gone ahead to clear our arrival with security, but even so, heads were already turning. A young intern dropped her stack of files. A manager froze mid-sip of his espresso. Dad, Emily whispered, her fingers digging into my arm. Everyone staring. I kept walking. Let them stare. The receptionist, a woman I didn't recognize, blinked rapidly as we approached. See, can I help you? Before I could answer, a voice boomed across the lobby. Holy shit, Marcus Carter. A barrel-chested man in his late 50s barreled toward us, his face splitting into a grin. Jerry Kowalski, my old head of security. He'd put on weight and lost some hair, but his handshake could still crush bones. 10 years, Jerry said, shaking his head. 10 goddamn years, and you waltzing here like it's Tuesday. I clapped him on the shoulder. Good to see you too, Ja. His eyes flicked to Emily. And this must be... my daughter, I confirmed. Emily, meet Jerry. He once took a bullet for me. Grazed my arm, Jerry corrected, though he stood a little taller. Emily managed a weak smile. Nice to meet you. The elevator ride to the top floor was tense. Jerry filled me in on the company estate. Profitable but stagnant, struggling to innovate without my direction. Emily stayed silent, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. When the doors opened on the executive floor, chaos greeted us. People scrambled like ants, shouting into phones, rushing between offices. A harried assistant nearly collided with us, her eyes going wide when she saw me. Mr. Carter. We weren't. I mean, the board didn't. Clara emerged from the crowd, looking pleased with herself. Told them you were coming. They've been scrambling for the past 20 minutes. I nodded. Where's Reynolds? Corner office, having what I assume is a very expensive panic attack. As we marched down the hall, whispers followed in our wake. That's really him. Thought he was dead. Did you see the news? The door to the CEO's office was closed, but not for long. I didn't bother knocking. Charles Reynolds, my former protege, the man who'd taken my company, looked up from his desk, his face draining of color. Marcus, he breathed. The office was different. My old oak desk had been replaced with some modern glass monstrosity. The walls, once lined with engineering schematics, now displayed generic corporate art. Only one thing remained unchanged, the view of the city skyline to floor-to-ceiling windows. I took it all in with a slow sweep of my eyes before settling on Reynolds. Charles, you've redecorated. He stood abruptly, knocking over his coffee cup. dark liquid spread across some financial reports. I can explain. No need. I walked to the window, gazing at the city below. I read the quarterly reports. Profits down 12% last year. Employee satisfaction at an all-time low. 3 failed product launches. I turned back to him. You ran my company into the ground. Reynolds' jaw worked. It's not your company anymore, isn't it? From my jacket pocket, I withdrew a single sheet of paper. The contract Clara had spent months securing. Reynolds took it with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the text. His breath left him in a rush. This can't be legal. Clara smirked. Every signature, every clause. Check with your lawyers if you want. Emily, who'd been silent until now, stepped forward. Dad? What is that? I met Reynolds' horrified gaze. A majority shareholder agreement, effective immediately. The room spun into motion. Reynolds started shouting for his lawyers. Clara began barking orders to stunned executives. Jerry positioned himself at the door like a sentry. And Emily? Emily looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. The boardroom was packed. Every chair at the long mahogany table was filled. Board members, executives, legal counsel. Reynolds sat stiffly at the head, his lawyers whispering urgently in his ears. I took my time entering, letting the murmurs die down before speaking. 10 years ago, I left this company in capable hands. Or so I thought. A projector screen lit up behind me, displaying financial charts. Clara had prepared the presentation, but the words were mine under Reynolds' leadership. Carter Innovations has become a shadow of itself, risk-averse, complacent, more concerned with quarterly dividends than actual innovation. Reynolds slammed his hands on the table. This is outrageous. You abandoned this company. You have no right. I have every right. I tapped the contract still clutched in his hand. 51% gives me final say on all matters, starting with leadership. The room erupted. Amid the chaos, Emily tugged my sleeve. Dad, what are you doing? I lowered my voice. What I should have done years ago. It took 15 minutes to restore order. When the vote was called, the result was inevitable. Reynolds was out. The company was mine again. As the board members filed out, some congratulating me, others avoiding eye contact, Reynolds cornered me near the windows. You'll regret this, he hissed. You think you can just waltz back in after a decade? The industry has changed. You're obsolete. I studied his face, the sweat on his brow, the tremor in his hands, the fear. Funny, I said. That's exactly what your son-in-law said about me. His confusion lasted only a moment before realization dawned. Daniel Harrington? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The pieces were all falling into place. The press had dubbed it the billionaire's revenge, but that wasn't quite right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. The Harrington estate loomed before me, its iron gates gleaming under the afternoon sun. Reporters swarmed the perimeter, held back by private security. Inside that mansion, Daniel and his father were no doubt scrambling, their lawyers working overtime to contain the fallout. Emily sat beside me in the car, her hands clenched in her lap. She hadn't spoken since we left Carter Innovations. You're quiet, I said. She swallowed hard. I'm trying to understand. I nodded. Ask me anything. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. Why did you really leave? All those years ago. It wasn't just a walk away from the company, was it? The memories rushed back. Late-night meetings, hushed conversations. The slow dawning horror of what Reynolds had been doing behind my back. No, I admitted. I left because I found out Reynolds was embezzling, skimming profits, falsifying records, enough to land him in prison for a very long time. Emily's breath caught. Then why didn't you? Because he wasn't working alone. I met her gaze. His partner was Richard Harrington. Her face went pale. Daniel's father? I nodded. They thought I didn't know. Thought I was just some naive CEO who cared more about engineering than finances. But I found out, and when I confronted Reynolds, he made it clear that if I went public, people would get hurt. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. People like me? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The car rolled to a stop. It was time to end this. Richard Harrington's study smelled of leather and expensive scotch. He stood behind his desk, his face a mask of forced calm. Daniel hovered near the fireplace, his usual arrogance replaced by something far more interesting. Fear. "Marcus," Richard said smoothly, "I assume you're here to discuss this morning's unfortunate press coverage?" I took my time sitting, making myself comfortable in one of his plush chairs. Emily stood beside me, her posture rigid. "I'm here," I said, "to give you a choice." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A choice." I reached into my jacket and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were copies of bank records, financial transfers, everything Clara and I had spent years compiling. "Resign from all corporate boards by end of day tomorrow," I said. "Repay every cent you and Reynolds stole with interest, or I take this to the SEC." Richard's composure cracked. "You can't prove." "I can, and I will." Daniel finally found his voice. "This is blackmail." "No," Emily said quietly. "It's mercy." The room fell silent. Richard stared at his son, then at me, then at the damning evidence on his desk. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "You'll have my resignation by morning." 1 month later, the headlines had changed. Carter Innovations announces new era under founder's leadership. Harrington family steps down from corporate boards. The waiter who was worth billions. The full story. Emily filed for divorce. Daniel didn't fight it. The day the papers were signed, she came to my office, our asterisk office now, because she'd taken a role heading up corporate philanthropy. "You were right," she said, dropping into the chair across from me. "About everything." I shook my head. I wasn't right to disappear. To let you think I was just some failed waiter. She toyed with a pen on my desk. "Why did you keep working at that hotel?" I thought about it. At first, it was to stay hidden. But after a while, I liked it. No board meetings. No backstabbing. Just honest work. Emily smiled faintly. "And now," I said, standing and offering her my arm, "I believe we have a company to run." She took it. Together, we walked out, not as a billionaire and his daughter, but as partners. Finally equals. Finally free. The end.